if you go back and look at the photos right now, it'll blow your mind.
And dude, the only thing I had figuring out at that time was probably what product I was going to be putting in my hair. So funding like these photo shoots, and it'd get clicks after clicks after clicks, and like, okay, I got the momentum, where we're going to go from this.
Somebody who is looking to get into sales, what is some of the advice that you would have for them to just land the opportunity?
So for me, to land a sales job interview.
President's Club, sales rep, model, actor, now comedian. And I have to say, dude, my favorite thing about you, and it's something that I think is just super important in the world right now, is that you're a man of values. And I think that since I've known you, you've always been somebody who just reflects on who you are, and the things that you do, the things that you have done, and how they impact just the world around you.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is super important right now.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. I just like to wear my heart on my sleeve, I guess.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, welcome on to the pod.
Thanks, man.
I want to start by telling you something that I've never forgotten. And I've told other people when you've come up in conversation, but I wanted to tell you. So a few years back, I had to say this is probably 2016, 2017, we went and did a photo shoot with Arel.
Oh, yeah.
And so I will never forget, this was actually my first photo shoot, and it was actually something that reignited creativity in my life. And I'll never forget that you took me to that photo shoot, you paid for it, and it was just a moment in time that I remember just thinking, like, this dude is awesome. Like, he's the man. Like, for you to do that was just so awesome, and I think is so illustrative of the type of person you are. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, man.
Dude, yeah, I completely forgot about that time. That was, Arel was somebody I met through just friends. I forget exactly how I met him. I think I went to like a meet and greet once upon a time. We met, and then I remember you mentioning to me about, like, you know, some of the photo shoots I was doing at the time. And I was like, dude, we can do it so like simple, so comfortable. I know the perfect guy. And, you know, dude, that was crazy, dude. We were so young then. We were way more young then.
You know what's crazy? If you go back and look at the photos right now, it'll blow your mind. Like,
yeah.
When I was going through some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and I wrote that down, I was like, let me just go look at those photos. And I scrolled through and looked at those photos, and I was like, wow, I was a baby. Dude. Like, not just like physically, but it just mentally and emotionally took me back to where my mind was at that time. And I was like, you were such a baby. Like, you didn't know anything about anything in this world.
Oh,
right?
Man, it's crazy to look back on those times where you're like, man, I didn't know what was going on, but you thought you had it all kind of figured out to a certain extent. You had like 4 or 5 things you had figured out. And dude, the only thing I had figuring out at that time was probably what product I was going to be putting in my hair at the time, or what I was going to wear, to be honest with you. And that was a crazy time, man. Oh, man, dude. Yeah, I still have those photos from those photo shoots and everything on a folder in my phone. You know, I like to look back, reminisce, kind of say like I did that. But dude, hey, man, I'm glad that experience, you know, kind of sparked something in you or made you feel comfortable doing that kind of thing. Because I think before that day and also after that day, dude, you kind of like, you went on to like, dude, I always felt like you had like this, I don't know if you've ever seen the P. Diddy documentary, and I'm not comparing you to P. Diddy, but I am putting you in like kind of like that box area where, dude, he was just promoting early on in his career. He was just promoting parties. And I remember you promoted this one place I drove past the other day, all the way over in Warnerville. I don't know if you remember. Yes. Dude, that was like the biggest thing at the time. And I was like, dude, that's crazy that like you could just see the progression of where you kind of went from, you know, from where you are now to then. It was just like, that's crazy. I'm glad I could, you know, spark that in a sense. It's just, dude, I haven't seen Arel in years, but dude, I see his Instagram from here and there and everything, but dude, that's awesome. Dude, oh my God. You bring that up to other people?
Yeah. I brought that up in conversation whenever you come up. I always associate people's faces with different stories.
Yeah.
Like, moments, experiences, stories, those are the things that I correlate with. That's who that person is.
Yeah.
So to me, I always see you as the model actor, John, and I see you as that moment. The fact that you went out of your way to do something like that you didn't have to do, and how it just inspired me in a way during that time. And so, again, just wanted to give you your flowers.
Thanks,
today,
man.
But let's dive into that a little bit, because you're a star at the modeling stuff, bro. And like sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, why did he stop? Why doesn't he do it? But let's just start from the beginning. Like what started the creative journey for you as far as getting in front of the camera, and what's that journey been like so far?
So for modeling, I remember. So what kind of started was my mom always saying I was photogenic. Now, everyone always says that the parents are always like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. But like she kind of said, you look really photogenic. Like, I don't have that in me. You probably get that from your dad or something like that. And then they took one photo of me at my mom's wedding. And I remember showing it to certain people, and people were like, do you model? I'm like, no, I don't model. I never even thought about doing that. And that's when I was like, man, maybe I could actually do this kind of thing. And then it kind of snowballed to where, you know, Instagram at the time was like that 2016, 2017 era where everyone and their mother was a model. And I was like, okay, I don't want to just be that internet guy. Like, I still see photographers that are still like big on Instagram, but that's all they do. Like, I've met them in person. That's all they kind of like stay in that box. So I kind of snowballed it. I was like, okay, let's see what we can do. So I went down the list of all these Instagram photographers, and I would just follow all these people and see what they would be posting and be on my feed. And I'm like, I want to do that. I could do that. I could do this. And I was like, let's go into the pocket of having tattoos and some sort of hair. So it's kind of where I went with it. And I was smoking cigarettes at the time.
I was going to say maybe a cigarette or two.
Yeah. It's great. And everyone was getting into it. And then also what really got me into it was, so I was looking at it like from like a weird scope where I was like, okay, like I want to be a brand. So like I saw how like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's a brand now. Like he has his Under Armour. He's not just the WWE when he came out. I remember him being The Rock, like coming out, you know, talking smack to Stone Cold Steve Austin. So I was like, he's kind of evolved that. I'm like, I want to evolve into something more. So I was thinking like 3-4 years down the line, what I wanted to do when I was not even taking a photo yet. So what I would do is I'd message these photographers, like, hey, man, you want to do a photo shoot? Sometimes it'd be free. Sometimes it wouldn't be. And I was working at Buca di Beppo, paying my photo shoots off tips. So funding like these photo shoots, and it'd get clicks after clicks after clicks. And it's like, okay, I got the momentum. Where are we going to go from this? And my buddy Brandon lives out in LA, Brandon Perea, and he was doing acting. And I was also curious about acting. And what was the movie that kind of got me into that was Catch Me If You Can. Okay. Was the big movie. I remember watching that when I first moved into the Deerfield house where my mom got remarried. And I watched it on the floor because my TV wasn't mounted yet. And I was hooked on that movie. So that got me into acting. I didn't know what I wanted to be growing up. I wanted to join the Air Force right out of high school. I ran into a little bit of trouble just being a troubled youth. That didn't really work out. And then I got forearm tattoos. So then I couldn't join the military. So I know I'm bouncing around a lot, but like kind of give you and other people, like, where did you start to become model actor? So it kind of fell into place where, you know, I had the looks, I had the drive. Let's just see what we can do and make, you know, work a little hard. And so I'd message these photographers, I get photo shoots, I post them, and then I want to get paid for it. I was like, okay, we've done enough free stuff where we've put money in other people's pockets. What can we do to get paid out of this? Because that was always the goal. Like I always wanted to be paid for my craft. And, you know, it's not, yes, it's easy and it's hard to be standing in front of a camera and take photos, but it's a little bit different when you're like, it's an 8-hour photo shoot and you're doing a bunch of stuff. Like it's exhausting at times. You got to be on, you got to be healthy. You got to, you know, have clear skin. You got to take care of your body. Like there's a lot of investment into it. And
you got to have energy.
Yes. Jacob Oda helped me get into the gym to stay fit. So that's also kind of a stepping stone for me where I saw that like with a little bit of effort in the gym, I wasn't just a pretty face. I could also do both. But The wall that I ran into with modeling is that I had so many tattoos that I had a hard look. I was locked in a box. And I kind of got sick and tired of everyone telling me how I should look. So I wanted to look the way I wanted to look because I was like, you know what, dude, fuck it. I want to be me. I don't want to be somebody else. I want to be me. So that's kind of where it kind of trailed off to where I focused more of my energy on acting, where I was like, I want to be more on the stage. I want to be more than just like a photo. To answer your question in a very long-winded way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so the next step that you kind of took was sales, right? I know for myself personally, the creative side of things, like getting comfortable in front of a camera, acting a scene out in front of a group of people, speaking in front of a group of people, promoting events, products, and things like that. That's helped me a ton in my sales career. I know that's also a step you took next. And obviously as a President's Club sales rep, like you found a lot of success in sales. So how did doing all of those things, what are some of the moments that you look back on like so far in the sales journey and think like, okay, this came from that photo shoot or that class or that time that I was on the stage? What are some of those things that you look back on and you're like, that's helped me a ton?
What helped me go from modeling and acting to and applying those same things that I learned, like that hustle and grit, to sales was I think my hustle. Like I used to look at people and be like when I first started in logistics, I'd walk in and I'd see like all these dudes there, or dudes and girls, making a lot of money, like $1 Million Club, you know, President's Club, and I'm like, I want to do that. And I was only there for like 2 months. I'm like, how am I gonna get there?
By the way, for those who are watching, you're like, what is even President's Club? It's typically something that the company sets that is like above and beyond goal in terms of revenue that you generate for the organization. And if you achieve that goal, then they send you out on a vacation, you and a +1, and congratulate you. Sometimes you get a bonus depending on where you're at, things like that.
Yeah. And so I didn't even think about President's Club. I just wanted to be great. Like I always had this grit where I'm like, I want to be the best at anything I do. So when I did modeling, I'd look at people and be like, okay, they're doing that. Why can't I do that? They're getting paid for this. Why can't I? So I would look at other people in the sales realm and I'd ask these guys that are doing well, what are you doing? Like, what's working for you? Because it's not working for me. Whatever I'm doing, it's not working. So I want to ask you. So I'd ask them questions until they tell me to just like fuck off until the end of time. But I would just figure out a way to get information, even if it was a one little thing. And I just kept at it. I just kept outworking somebody else. Like, eventually, I'm gonna win. So if someone next to me made 70 calls, I made 90 calls. If somebody else did 100 emails, I did 120. I just wanted to be at the top of the leaderboard of being like effort. Because effort will eventually turn into opportunity, and opportunity will eventually make it be like lucky. You might get that 1% where you just call at the right time, at the right day. But if you constantly do those things and stay consistent and stay disciplined, you'll do that. And I learned that in acting and modeling by disciplining myself with like my body, like my time. And then I applied that to sales where I was like, okay, we got to be efficient with the time. We got to be disciplined with, you know, it's 2:00, you know, you get out at 4:30, you got to make, 50 more dials. You better just hit that number somehow, some way. And on my way to hitting 50 dials, I might get lucky. And that's kind of where I applied those things. I've always been outgoing enough to talk to people and be in a room full of people and like kind of like say, hey, I'm Jeff, like this is where I'm from and all that. So talking on the phone, I'd look for what we call hot buttons. And I'd look for something to talk about. So I used to talk to this one guy who moved hay out of Utah. And he's like, Jeff, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Chicago, Illinois. He goes, ooh, that mare of yours. And I'm like, what's wrong with my mare? And I eventually just started getting him to talk about politics. And sure enough, he gave me 2 loads and I made him a new customer. So that was kind of like the process of like, the more often I did it, the luckier I got.
Okay. So you learned a lot of discipline from the acting and modeling. You mentioned something, hot buttons. Can you walk us through that a little bit? Like what does that look like? What does that sound like for someone who hasn't been in sales or is looking to get into it?
So hot buttons would be something like a topic for the person like to continue the conversation or to get the other person interested in the phone call. Cold calling, you're obviously trying to talk to the right person. So let's say you get the right person, you want them to be interested in the conversation. You don't want to hear the same thing over and over again. So I'd, talk about either like a hot button would be like a restaurant nearby. Like I would pull up Google if I'm calling someplace in Milwaukee, be like, hey man, like, oh, I saw that restaurant. It's like down the street. You like going there on lunch breaks and stuff? Like just ask them a side question and try to get them to talk about their lives because people like talking about themselves. So I want the conversation to be about them and me just listen. And I learned the hot button term from door knocking. Before I got into logistics sales, I was in door-to-door sales. So the hot button was...
Two of the toughest sales.
Yeah. Don't make it easy in any kind of way. So the hot buttons for door-to-door sales were like a break-in the neighborhood. I'd hear something over like... Because I would sell security systems. So a hot button would be like a break-in the neighborhood. Or you just moved into a new house. A topic where they want to talk about. Because, everyone likes to gossip about their neighborhood or, oh, I just got this new car or this new house, anything to get them, make the conversation not about sales and more about them. They'll be more receptive to taking inside information, which they might not know about, which would be sales.
I almost see them as triggers.
Yes.
So like if I hear something in my mind that triggers like, okay, I can dive into that. I can be more curious about that. I can go into my open-ended questions.
Yes.
Which reminds me of what you were talking about as far as giving them the opportunity to talk because everyone wants to talk.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you'll be in a good position. Yeah. I was just sitting down with my buddy Pat. You guys got to meet, by the way. Great dude. You guys would get along great. He's a top sales rep at our organization right now. And we were talking about how to land a role in sales, right? Like what are some of the top ways to do that? So if you were talking to somebody who was looking to get into sales, what is some of the advice that you would have for them to just land the opportunity? Specifically, if you could elaborate too, in an interview as well.
So for me, to land a sales job in an interview, so for TQL, when I worked at Total Quality Logistics, my job for them was in the interview to show them that I had no experience because not a lot of people have logistical sales, but I had the desire to want to earn and learn. So I basically told them like, hey, look, I don't have any logistics sales. And the difference between me and the guys that are out there on the floor that you're currently working with is that I was door knocking in 100-degree weather outside. They're right now just picking up the phone that's less than a foot away from them in an air conditioning building. And I was able to close business and to do sales in all those other factors on top of it. If they have any excuses, I'd love to hear them. So like I presented it in a way where I'm like, I'm gonna work harder. I'm here to work hard. I'm here to learn. So I think in an interview process to get a new sales job, if you're entry level, C-suite level, any type of level sales job, I'd say you want to work hard and you want to learn and earn. I think like most salespeople are previously athletes and they want to like be competitive. That's cool. But I think if you can tell the hiring manager or the person that you're interviewing for that I want to earn and learn, that's a good place to start. Those are kind of what two factors that people look for salespeople.
If we were on the Bradley podcast, I'd drop the bomb sound. So because like every time somebody drops bombs, it just like makes like the bomb sound on this podcast. But what was it? Learn and earn.
Learn and earn.
Learn and earn.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that's really all anybody wants on their sales team, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's coachable, that's willing to learn.
Yep.
And number two, somebody who wants to earn their way. Somebody who wants to work for it, doesn't want to come in and just get something handed to them.
Yes.
Right? Everybody eventually wants to manage accounts, manage a team of people, manage something and not be managing transactions and outbound activity. But no one gets to just walk in and do that unless you're going after like some of those bigger organizations and you get kind of lucky early on. But what are some of the tougher things that you've had to deal with and come from the perspective of like at the very best, right? At the moments where you were at your best in sales or at your best in the corporate environment and you felt the most excited about being there, what were still some of the things that you struggled with about the environment? So I'll give you an example for myself personally.
Okay.
One of the things that I struggle with is I need autonomy. Like I need the freedom to be able to do things how I want them, when I want them.
Yep.
And that is something that you've got to work on in an environment like that. Like you don't own the company. You can't just do whatever you want, right?
Yes.
And so that's personally something I've actively got to work on. I got to be willing to follow the lead of other people who are paving the way and the direction they want to take the organization, right? So that's one of the things that I struggle with is just finding that autonomy in places where where you do have that, but it's not an open canvas like it would be if you were building your own thing.
I think the things that I struggled with are the things that I was like managing while I had this behemoth of sales in front of me. I think the relationships of people. So within the organization, I'd walk in, and if I'm doing a big deal and I'm like coming into a meeting or something, I had a hard time very early on, giving that person who has never been in my position tell me how to handle something. It's like, you've never been in my shoes. How are you going to tell me to handle a situation when you yourself haven't been in that situation? So I had a hard time taking that criticism and managing those relationships with those people who can't understand me, who I felt couldn't understand me. I should correct myself.
Yeah.
So how I learned to get better at that was understand that they're only trying to help, and I can't take it as like a personal attack. But it's hard not to when you're in sales, because you got this behemoth that you have to manage, make sure it produces money in any kind of way. But like, you got to take direction from somebody who's never been in your situation. It's weird. But what helped me understand it was, I don't like going back to it a lot, but I do kind of crutch it, is Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson did play basketball, but he was a better coach. And how do you coach the greatest basketball player arguably ever? How do you tell him to do something? It's very hard to do. But I thought to myself, if Michael Jordan can take criticism and make adjustments and work hard from somebody like Phil Jackson, and he's the greatest basketball player that people think of, then I can do that as a salesperson and a producer and an individual high producing sales role.
Yeah. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. By the way, that's a really good point. There's another bound right there. That's a really good point, that if Michael Jordan can be coachable,
Yes.
then the rest of the entire universe should be coachable.
Yes.
But was that typically situations where you were, or someone who was supporting you as a manager that didn't do the sales role in the past, or was it peers, or like what was it that was kind of lacking there in terms of experience for you, or was it just they hadn't reached your level of revenue and things like that? Like, what was it?
It was a mixture of factors. So I had a boss, and I won't name drop her in any kind of way, but she was good and bad, and I took the good with the bad. But she never made as much for the company as I did. And she was trying to manage me from a level where she herself has never been as an individual contributor. But she was also juggling other things at a time. So I think where I just felt like it was a personal attack is that she never did it. So how could you do it? But then going back to Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson never won 3 in a row. Phil Jackson never won, did all these crazy accolades before even winning his first championship. Phil Jackson never beat Magic Johnson in an NBA final. So I'm like, okay, just because they didn't do it doesn't mean they don't know how to do it. You have to be able to be coachable and sit there and take the information, even if it's a grain of salt at the end of the day. Like, from a fitness standpoint, there's a million things we see on the internet where people are like, this worked for me. Might not work for you. And you have to take that advice with a grain of salt at the end of the day. So like, some people say keto really works for certain people. It wouldn't work for me, and I've tried it. But you take it with a grain of salt, their advice. But just being able to absorb that information makes you the difference. And it's also a thing I still struggle with. It's just not taking it personally, but also kind of seeing it as a tool. Use it for your advantage or use it for your benefit.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you still got to figure out what works for you.
Yes.
Right? Like, you still have to be able to take that advice and try to use it in some way, shape, or form. Like, I'm a big believer that everybody can be a mentor to you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big fan of being a mentee. I think a lot of people want to be the mentor, want to be the leader, want to be the coach, want to be the owner. Especially right now, everybody wants to be the entrepreneur and founder and CEO. But a lot of the greatest of all of those titles were first a mentee for a long time, right? Like, I'm reading Mastery right now by Robert Greene.
I never heard of it.
And one of the things he talks about in terms of earning a level of mastery is the apprenticeship phase.
Okay.
Right? So taking this time to go into this mindset where you don't know things and take yourself to this childlike place where, like, even though you might know a little bit about where you're at in that field, in that skill set, in that that marketplace, whatever it might be, even though you might know things, going into this childlike place of like, okay, but what if I don't know those things? Because then your brain automatically starts to absorb things in a different way.
Yeah.
And is a lot more open-minded to what you can learn, right? But going back to what you were saying too, also, like, there's no one size fits all.
No.
But sometimes with winning, there are just some things that are repeatable.
Yes.
Right? Like, some things are just winning. If you get up and do something every single day, you're going to get better at it than the people who don't do it.
Yes.
If you dial the phone 80 times versus the person dialing 50, you're 30 phone calls better than them that day.
Yep.
And 60 tomorrow, and 90, and 120, and so on and so forth. And so that compounds. So I entirely get where you come from with that.
Yeah, and like with the compound, I learned that from, believe it or not, Kobe Bryant, because he would work out early on, like 4 times a day. He'd work out at like 4 a.m., 2 hours later, 2 hours after that, and he'd work out 4 or 5 times more than the next guy. So you could see the jumps that he would make in the off seasons compared to other people. And you can see that between both those players' games, like Kobe Bryant and like Gilbert or Arenas. So you could see the difference of their games as the years went on. So I learned that also. But like, as you said, in sales, some things are just like tried and true. The more calls you make, the more emails, the more outreach, the more likely you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's a numbers game sometimes. It just really is. But sometimes it is just making that lucky call at that lucky time. But to be lucky, you gotta set yourself up to be lucky.
Yeah, 100%. And also, like, I'm a big believer, like, you can get lucky one time, but if you continue to manage those big performance indicators, like, you're going to put yourself in a position to sustain that.
Yes.
Right? Like, that luck might cover you, might put you in profitability for 2 weeks or whatever it is. But then you still need to build up that pipeline. You still got to be able to create that inertia so that you continue to get lucky.
Yeah, and to your point about being like able to be a mentee at like certain stages of your career and everything, like I got promoted earlier on in 2022 to this really big account, and it needed help. And the person I was working with, he's an older guy, did sales for a number of years, but he was the guy that kind of got lucky, but he did it out of effort. Like, I remember him telling me stories about him calling his customers saying, "Hey man, I'm eating ramen noodles today. Like, what do you got? Like, I need something." So he remembers, but then I only saw him, the crisp, polished version of him, the guy that drives the BMW, not the guy that drove a Dodge Dart that was hustling. So I only saw one aspect of it, but I thought I knew everything, but there'd always be something I didn't know. And he would show me it, whether I liked it or not. And that was also something I struggled with. Like, I already know this. Why are you telling me this? It's like, no, you don't know this aspect of it. I'm like, okay, I guess I got to be coachable. And just learning from him to be coachable. And this guy would talk a lot, like talk. Like, you ever know those talkers that's like, okay, dude, this phone call's really long. I got to go, man. Like, he would just talk and talk. But he's an old Italian dude from Baltimore. He you know, that's how they are kind of thing, when they're, you know, they talk with their hands kind of like I do, but he would just beat it over my head until I got it. But being coachable made the long-term success happen between us. So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, I was just talking to my girlfriend about this the other day, because this concept of you don't know it that way, right? Like you think you know something.
Yeah.
Like I was just saying, I was like, the times where I heard somebody start to talk about something that I thought I knew, or teach me something that I thought I knew, the times where I was just pretending like I didn't know what they were going to teach me, I happened to learn something different.
Yep.
I happened to gain a new perspective or understand it in a different way. So it's like, even I think a lot of people are so quick to be like, oh, no, I know. You know, like you can't even get, like you can't even finish what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
But in that follow through, where in that sentence that people are going to finish, or that perspective that they're going to give you on that topic, you're going to learn so much more. You're going to learn an entirely different perspective on it.
Yeah. And when I was a manager in sales, to kind of pivot, I had a hard time. I was very direct, and I've always been more of a direct person with sales. Not in real life. Like I'm actually kind of like, I try to like make sure I don't hurt people's feelings, because I've been so direct that it kind of hurts people's feelings. But in sales, I couldn't really explain good news or bad news to people. And I learned from my buddy Cameron Mager. He told me this advice. I might be butchering it, but he was like, ask them for permission. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, so like, for example, I'd be like, hey, GC, can I like tell you something? And if you say yes, then you could tell them. But if they say no, doesn't matter. Don't tell them it. But he would say it in a way where it's like, hey man, like, I don't want this to change our relationship, but you know, I feel like, you know, I want to tell you something. Would it be okay if I tell you? And he presented where, you know, it could be not life or death, but it might change things after we have this conversation. And that thing changed how I presented people doing good things and bad things.
Cam, shout out to Cam. That's brilliant.
It was
there.
It was big.
I've actually never used that, and that's super helpful for me, because that's one of the things that I struggle with too. I mean, to this day, it's something that and it honestly works perfectly into the next thing that I want to talk to you about. But I'm so direct sometimes, and especially when I'm on the fly, like it's the middle of a busy day, like I'm just going and I'm going to tell you how it is. And that is such a valuable resource, because I feel like in that moment, you're kind of playing up something that's going to be something like, to your point, like it could really ruin the relationship. You're playing it up to be that, but then when you're telling somebody something that is going to help them, it's like way down here on the scale of like level of danger, that they're like, oh my God, Jeff, like, thank you so much. Like, dude, that's not, thank you for helping me. You're not going to ruin our relationship, man. At least that's how they're going to consume it. So that's pretty damn good. That's awesome. Shout out to Cam.
That definitely helped a lot with me telling. And I use that sometimes even with my friends and family, where I'm like, you know, I gotta have tough conversations and like present something that they might not like, or, hey man, like, I want to tell you something, but I really don't want it to change our relationship. Like, would it be all right if I tell you it?
Hey, I really want to give you some feedback on ABC, but I don't think it's something you're going to be excited about, and I don't want it to affect us.
Yes.
Do I have your permission to talk through it?
Yeah. And that alone, people being like, oh, like this person wants to help me, or this person wants to tell me something, it might change it. Like they like kind of, it feels like them like, it's like whispering to somebody. It's like scooting in. You want to hear what they say. You pay attention to what they say.
Yeah.
So that was something that really helped me out. And me and Cameron always kind of like bounce off ideas. We're in two different sales aspects, but like that's one of those like moments where I'm like, dude, that just makes sense. Why didn't I think of that kind of thing? But
that's awesome. So I recently, and this is something that is so fresh and new for me, but I'm really starting to dive into right now, which is shadow work.
Okay.
And Robert Greene is one of the ones that talks about like this concept of the shadow. Jordan Peterson talks about it a little bit, but it's essentially the part of you that you want to keep from the outer world. But as we all know, that stuff seeps out of you in moments throughout your life. Like you can't keep that shadow side of you or that dark side of you completely dormant, right? Like those things are going to arise, especially as stress comes in and things like that, or even positive ways, right? Like Pat Bet-David is coming out with a book this week. It's called Choose Your Enemies Wisely.
I love him.
Dude, I love it. He's awesome.
Dude, he's great.
And he talks about this concept of using those enemies as fuel, like
Yes.
people that said things about you and things like that, right? So it's just this whole world of using dark things
Yep.
for the betterment of how you perform in society is just really interesting to me right now. And I think for me, one of the things that, and we touched on it a little bit, but for me, it's like I'm just very independent.
Okay.
And so like just I have to have freedom to make decisions. I have to have that freedom. And when I don't, and when that I start to almost feel like I'm in a cage, and I can like internally feel a stress response where I'm like fighting to get out of that cage.
Okay.
And so that comes out in conversations sometimes. And it's something, again, that I'm really working on, but it comes out sometimes in conversations where to Jeff, it might feel like, damn, G was like really aggressive today. Like he was a little frustrated, or I wonder what I said to him that he got upset about, right? Like it could just be very subtle things like that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where, so far, from what I've learned about this whole shadow thing, that's kind of where I'm seeing that my shadow lies, is just that need to be independent, that need to be free, and a little bit, in some ways, a little bit of like aggression and anger and frustration.
Yes.
Right? So for you, what, if you, knowing what you know so far, based on just touching on it now, what are some of the things that you think your shadow says to you, and maybe what are some of the ways that it's interfered with your day-to-day or just your life in general?
Man, that's a good question. For background, Kobe Bryant's Muse was it's a big documentary for me, because he talks about how he separated Kobe Bryant from the Black Mambas, this idea of him just, like tearing it up on the basketball court. And he separated it, but he brought all this dark energy because he was kind of going through a hard time with just like what was going on in his personal life. I'm not going to touch base on it, but like he kind of had to put it somewhere. So he put it in basketball, and that's why he has all those like crazy games, and like he was just dominating at the time. So I learned that as like he was separating the two. Like he was just from, here's Kobe Bryant, the family man, and here's the Black Mamba, or Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. So for me, what my shadow tells me is